So today we're going to tie one of my favorite hoppers for the streams. It's nothing too complicated, it's pretty simple, and to be quite honest, it's the only hopper that I really fish down here in the Western Cape. It imitates a lot of the terrestrials, and it's a nice broad imitation. It's aerodynamic and it really catches fish. It's got a perfect profile in the water, and when that wind's up and stuff's getting blown into the water, it's a fish magnet. Yeah, you can tie it in a size 16 or size 14. In terms of threads, anything from a 6/0 to a 14/0 is okay, as long as you tend to follow the color of the body. So what I've got here is a size 14 dry fly hook. I prefer a hook with a slightly larger gape, as this one has. And all that's going to do is, once you have the foam and the deer hair in, just means you've got a bit more of a reach to hook into the fish. First step is you take your thread, start it behind the eye, latch it to the hook, and then you start moving forward to build up a thread body. Got a loose fiber. You are just going to go back to where the hook bends, and not anywhere further than that. The next step is your dubbing, and we're actually going to dub this pattern in reverse. And the reason for that is that when we tie in our foam, we don't have to go over it again with the thread. So I've gone 2/3 of the way forward, and I'm just going to take my dubbing. Any soft yellow dubbing will do the trick. And the biggest thing is, you don't want to build up too big of a body. If you think you have too much, you probably do. Let's build up a nice uniform taper. Now all that we are doing is just trying to get a carrot taper going back. I realize now I've got a bit too much dubbing, so I'll just pull that off. Tighten up my last bit, and wrap it down. Now the next step is we're going to take our foam. This is a 2mm foam in yellow, and we're going to cut out our hopper's body. So what you want is about 2mm thickness, 2.5mm wide, and 3 centimeters long. This just gives you a bit of something to work with. Perfect, so there we have it. Have the foam that I'm going to be working with. Now all that we are going to do is just taper the tips. So just take your scissors, trim the tips down, making sure that each side is nice and equal. May take a few attempts to get there. There we are, I've got a pretty equal thing. Then I just cut the tip off like that, and there we have a nice tapered body. Then all that you want to do is, you want about 4mm extending from the back of your hook. So what I've done is I've just done one wrap to measure it. I'll do another wrap to tighten it, and one wrap in front. Now in order to stop my thread from showing through on the fly, what I'm going to do is just take a super thin bit of dubbing, dub over my thread, this has no other purpose than to hide the thread from showing through. Actually decided to just make this slightly longer. There we are. To do one wrap in front, and now I'm going to start building up segments. So 2 tight wraps over the top, 1 in front. Onto my last segment. Just making sure that you're cutting that foam at 90 degrees. Perfect. There we are. Now all that you do is you cut your foam, you pull it out and you cut it at 45 degrees. And what this will allow you to do is wrap into this foam and flatten it while securing it at the same time. So that's all I'm going to do, just wrap down into it. There we are. Now my foam is nicely secured. Got a nice segmented body, and my next step is going to be tying in the pheasant tippets. So all that I have here is golden pheasant tippets, and when you're tying these into the fly, you actually want your shiny side facing down onto the water. So you can see I've got the shiny side here and the matte side here, and the reason for this is you just want a bit more color coming out of it. So all that I'm going to do is select around 10 to 12 pheasant tippets. You don't need to be too excessive, and cut these off. Perfect. You do want to make sure that your tips are pretty much even, and then from there all that you do is you just tie them in shiny side down. Okay, I'm going to need longer length than that. You want these tippets to just extend out over the back of the foam, just like that. So you can see they extend a small bit over the back of the foam, and that is the ideal situation. I've got my clump of deer hair here that I've now stacked, and as you can see all the tips are in line. They're equal lengths. Okay, it's a bit of a challenge, just rotating it, and I'm going to stack it again because I messed up the tips. Perfect, got that one loose fiber there. Get rid of that, grab the tips, and now we're going to determine how much we want. So we want our deer hair to fold over and be shorter than your golden pheasant tippets, but just slightly longer than the foam. So just it's a bit of a challenge, trying to use a judgment call on how much you want. Trim it all flush at 90 degrees. Now all that you want to do is just pinch wrap and wrap that deer in front. Do one wrap over the eye to stop it from slipping forward, and then tighten up with a few nice tight wraps. Okay, I've made this one slight bit too long, so all that I'm going to do is just undo it, which is easier said than done. And just trim it a tiny little bit shorter. Perfect. So I've got my deer in, it's tied in nicely. Now all you do is take a pair of fine point scissors and trim off all of those little excess fibers. while maintaining to leave your tips untouched. Perfect. Now you dub again from the front of the fly back, and all that we're going to take is a nice natural scroll dubbing. And this is just going to be to build up the head of our fly. Start at the front and just dub back. Let's get a bit more dubbing in there. There we are. And now we're going to fold our deer hair over in order to create the bullet head. So I've folded it over, making sure it's equal on both sides. I'm just going to do 2 tight wraps with my thread. And now what this has created is we have a hopper where the pheasant tippets stick out. It's a bit of fluff from the deer hair left there. Just longer than the hair, but the hair is longer than the foam. So we get a really nice wing profile. Eye is still exposed, so that won't be an issue at all. See, I've got a few loose fibers around the head. So I'm just going to neaten that up nicely. Perfect. And now we just are going to tie on our rubber legs. I prefer orange for early season, and then you can go a little bit more natural later on. But for early season, having a bit of color in the fly never hurts. And the biggest thing is the Madam X profile. If you can get that right, it's all that really matters. Making sure not to trap any deer hair. You can tie on your orange legs. And how tight you tie on your legs will determine how much they spread out. So I'm going to start off with 2 relatively loose wraps, and my third one will be slightly tighter. Trim off that, it's not at the final length, just quite yet. And all that you do is you go in and you repeat on the other side. 2 nice wraps, third one slightly tighter. Trim off your excess. And the final step is now to go and do a little bit of dubbing just to cover up your thread. So what I like to do with this one is actually go with the yellow dubbing. It's just a bit easier to work with than the squirrel, but in all honesty it doesn't really matter, as this is just filling in the gap in between your thorax and your head. Perfect. And now you can just take your thread out to the side, like so. It's always a bit easier said than done. Get your thread out to the front. Just get a few wraps out in front of that eye. Take your whip finish. Finish it off and then pull back, making sure that you are not covering up your eye in any way. I'm happy that my eye is well enough exposed. Trim off the excess. And now I see that I'm not quite happy with how my legs are spread out. So I'm just going to fiddle around with them until I get it right. Okay, so try twisting them the other way. Bit of a stretch out. Okay, there we are. Now you just trim your legs down to size. I like working with just less than a centimeter out the front and just under a centimetre and a half out the back. Perfect, and there you have it, a little Cape Streams hopper. It's got really nice colour in it, a great profile, and it's pretty aerodynamic. So it really allows you to fish this pattern in very windy conditions. I personally prefer rubber legs with a bit of banding in them, but at the moment I'll just take a marker at the end and colour in a little bit of banding, just to give your pattern a bit more variation and contrast on the water surface. But in terms of technique, that's all that you need to know. That's a pattern right there that does the damage.